everyone. Thanks for coming and joining our session today. I think we're the final session of this week, and I hope the rest of the week's been positive and interesting and some good stuff there as well. We're not gonna do a presentation today. We haven't got anything structured or anything to show you, but we're gonna have a conversation, and we're gonna have a conversation around the principles around authentic leadership, bringing your whole self to work through the lens of especially about disability and about ableism as well. And the reason we've chosen to have this conversation is because I think when you hear about bringing your whole self to work and authenticity, for me, there's lots of people talking about it, like there were about mindfulness and like there were about trauma-informed practice, but there's probably not an agreed definition. And it's the type of thing that's easy to talk about and really hard to do. And what do we actually mean? And how do we do it? And how do we create the conditions to do it as well? So we wanted to have a conversation around all of those sorts of things. And I had a conversation with Mark and thought, okay, we should get Mark. And then Daryl came along and joined us. And Daryl's going to put us through our paces with a bit of a Q&A later for the panel, and anyone else that wants to kind of come in, and he's going to be basically the Fiona Bruce of the world, and ask us some questions. And if anyone's got any thoughts or questions around that, then we're going to ask you just to come in and join us in having that conversation. And then Becca's come along to join us as well with her. She's got perspectives from the VCS Alliance and freelance perspective and working for organisations that are committed to social justice. And Asif from Bradnet is trying to join us. He's got experience of leadership, working in the VCS, but also lived experience as well. He's having a few technical issues, so we're hoping that he's able to join us shortly. So what I thought we would do is we just quickly introduce ourselves and where we're from. Talk a little bit ourselves about what we mean by bringing our whole selves to work and authenticity. And then whilst folk are doing that, I'll see if I can get hold of Asif as well. So my name is Vicky. I am the Chief Executive for a charity called Project 6. I'm also chair of the Bradford VCS Alliance. And I think I'm here today because I had some conversations with Shaq. Some folk brought together some really great ideas to a leadership meeting I was in. And it really made me think about bringing yourself to work. Aha, here we go. Asif has just joined us, about bringing your whole self to work and authenticity, but how much easier it is to do if you're in a position of privilege. And I started to really think about my organisation. I started to think about when we check in our EDI protected characteristics, people the area where people most commonly don't want to tell us about is an area of disability. People are really happy to tell us about their sexuality, about their race, but disability is quite often the one where people say, I don't want to say. And it made me think, what's that about? How can I create a different, better culture so people are able to and happy to say that? And we started talking about, we asked people to disclose their disability. Why are we disclosing something? You know, you disclose a criminal record, not that I think there's anything wrong with having a criminal record, but so language matters in that type of thing. So it's something I've been thinking about for a while. So yeah, when Shaq asked us if we would do this session, we were really pleased to do that. So I'll pass you on to Mark to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Nicholson. I'm the Chief Executive of Equality Together. We're a disabled people user-led organisation, and we've been in existence since 1979 in some shape or form. Very much echoing Vicky, realistically, in terms of how people bring themselves to work. And obviously, we know that through protected characteristics, a lot of people will always prefer not to say. And that is because of the expectations of other people and how that could at times feel that the individual may be discriminated, but also how they feel with themselves and how they want to express themselves. So to be part of this conversation today is really, really good. And obviously from our perspective, to look at opportunities in workforce and leadership development for disabled people as a whole is something that we are very keen to work with and support and enable people to take that part of the step forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So Daryl, over to you.
Hi, I'm Daryl Smith. I work with Equality Together and Bradford Hate Crime Alliance. I My career and I used to work in the public sector, my career has been about the EDI agenda, particularly from disabled people's rights perspective. Very simply, I think bringing my whole self to work is about knowing that I am valued and that I value my colleagues equally.
Great, thank you, Daryl. Becca?
Hi, my name's Becca Hewitt. I'm essentially a freelance worker now, but over my career I've worked in the NHS around information and also in the voluntary sector, especially around, as Vicky said, social justice. And for a while I was Chief Exec of Equity Partnership, which is an LGBT charity in Bradford. I've tussled with what that means about bringing yourself to work. I've gone on about it, banged on about it even for years. And it comes out of my own journey of, for many years, not revealing my entire identity at work, my sexual orientation, and then deciding one day that I just couldn't not anymore. It was not good for me and it wasn't healthy for my work. But I've also learned that not everybody, as Daryl said, feels safe bringing that information about themselves to the workplace environment for lots of reasons, and as Mark said. So I've concluded, I think, at the moment anyway, that my definition of it is about having a space and permission to express what you care about, your passions, what you're good at, your skills and talents, and what you know. And those are the things that tell others who you are. And I think that's, at the moment, my definition of bringing yourself to work.
Thank you, Becca. And hi, Asif, welcome. You're on mute. You're on mute, my dear. Oh, now frozen. Oh.
Hello.
Yay. Hey, there you go. We can hear you.
Hello. Good afternoon to you all. My apologies for a late arrival, but defeated by technology yet again when you need it most. But here I am. I'm Asif Hussain. I've been involved in the disability movement, if you like, since '98, having worked at different projects, notably Bernardo's, RNIB, and then from 2003 onwards at Bradnet, Asian Disability Organisation, which is what it started off as, but then it became Bradnet, providing outreach and advocacy for disabled people. More latterly, we're delivering personal social care and personal care to disabled people, working within the umbrella of Inspired Neighbourhoods, which is a major health and social care umbrella organisation with mental health and disability. But firstly, thank you for giving me the opportunity really to be involved in, and I think bringing the whole self to work and into the world really. It's all about you as an individual, having that individual worth with your good qualities and your flaws, just like a non-disabled person, and I always have regarded a society putting barriers in the way to enable that individual to express himself or herself in a dignified manner in society, be it at work, be it at home, accessing leisure and recreational services. So it's challenges. Myself, I've got health challenges as well as the actual visible disability. So the workplace should be all about integrating the individual within the framework so that they can flourish just like a non-disabled person or non-LGBT person, etc. So I've always feared labels being attached to people ever since I've tried to support disabled people, or their LDs or the LD departments supports them, or mental health. And I think that's always the problem when you're delivering services from a statutory point of view. From an individual point of view, everybody has their own complex makeup. So bringing my whole self to work is all about, as Darryl put it, me being valued and me valuing others as well.
Great, thanks a lot. So what we're going to do now is Daryl has got a few questions for us, and the questions are thinking about the lens of bringing your whole self to work, but are there within organisations the structural things that we do that can be structural barriers to folk doing that? And he's going to ask us questions about how we get people into the organisation, how we support people in the organisation, how we promote people through the organisation and help people flourish, as if just said, because I think flourishing is really, I think that's a great word to describe actually. So Daryl is going to put us through our paces, and if anyone else wants to come in on any, so if he asks the panel the questions, and then if people want to come in with thoughts and comments, I'd really welcome that from people. Thoughts, comments, challenges, botherations, great ideas. Just if you put your hand up, we'll be able to let you in and join the conversation. That would be brilliant.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Yeah, the questions that I'm asking are slightly provocative, and I think that's, and I apologise. Actually, I don't, but I think that's the point. That's the point of it, really. And it's just to get us to think and recognising that we're not perfect. It's not about saying that we are perfect. It's about how open we are, I suppose, to explore these issues and to continue to grow. So the first question to the panel is, thinking about your recruitment and your processes that you have, what inherent biases have you identified and who might they exclude? That's the first part of the question. Who would like to go first? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll tell you what. I'll pick on Mark.
Thank you, Daryl. Okay. I mean, from our perspective, I think that we've looked in depth in terms of our recruitment process as a whole, because we feel that our current processes was excluding and creating issues. Was that in terms of bias, or was trying to stay within a structure-based approach, not allowing the whole person to really sell themselves? And that's something that we've been looking at. So our approach moving forward has been very much at looking at what we're looking for that person, how they're able to communicate, how they can express themselves, but look in terms of how we look forward within the role, how we can really embrace the opportunity to make reasonable adjustments for that individual within the workplace. And I think that's the most important thing, is not having the preconception of these are the boundaries. It's the person, how we can work to help support the person to deliver that role. So I think it's an evolving process in terms of our unconscious bias and how we work through that. And I think that is something in terms of how you embrace the challenge and the quality assurance within the service users and people with lived experience, and how that can help drive us forward in a different way.
Okay, thank you. Becca.
Well, I don't work for an organisation specifically, so it's sort of thinking about what I do when I work with organisations around advising them. I think one of the key things that strikes me that's a changing picture around recruitment is how the process, which traditionally has been an interview, is done. And I hear increasingly stories of people taking much more kind of out of the box approaches to doing that, not making it all about how good are you at answering questions on the spot, how good are you at sitting in a room and responding to people firing things at you, rather to actually design a process which enables the person to demonstrate their ability to do the job, which is essentially why you're, trying to recruit someone. And that could take a number of forms depending on the role, obviously, and the person. But the bit about that Mark's just said about actually kind of focusing not on what people can't do, but what they can do, what are their abilities, what are their assets, and going back to what I was saying about, you know, creating a space that enables someone to demonstrate their skills and talents and passions and what they know in a way that's comfortable for them. But I guess in front of all that is ensuring that whoever's designing the process is of those people that you want to recruit, you know, come from those communities, can inform the way that you're doing things. No one person is ever going to have all of the answers. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So you've just got to open that door, have a blank sheet and let people in and help you. That would be my take on it, Daryl.
Thank you, Becca. Asif, do you have a...
I think the issue about recruitment is a very, very challenging one, because I see it in 2 or 3 stages. Firstly, the actual recruiters or the people involved in selecting new colleagues or board members has to divorce their personal prejudices. And I'll be honest that as a disability organisation, we had serious challenges in trying to aspire to be a user-led organisation. But I knew that, you know, involving people with learning disabilities or severe learning was hugely challenging, because we weren't set up to understand their capacity, their intellectual ability, even their physical ability. And, you know, it's very easy to fall into the danger of other organizations of cherry picking your employees based upon your personal prejudices. So I think the first thing is to remove that personal, almost like a fear factor, anxiety, because let's face it, having a user-led organization is challenging in its own rights, in ensuring that you supported all colleagues, be it in the staffing or the board level, to have the empowerment issues involving in the organization. So it's key that those people are given greater awareness, training, an external view into the organization to remove that barrier. The second thing is that the actual recruitment process, of colleagues have touched upon, has to be destructured. You know, I for one, I've always hated exams. So an interview is the next best friend of exams. And you're supposed to perform on that best day to get a result for yourself. If you're feeling unwell, you've got health challenges, and as an increasing awareness of mental health challenges, the interview process is outmoded, in my opinion, and other approaches should be deployed to select people. People should be given an opportunity to maybe video themselves or have telephone interviews. Different formats need to be tried to ensure that everybody has a fair chance at that opportunity. And I think thirdly, people themselves who are looking for jobs need better support, need better awareness, need better training to flourish in the workplace, because, you know, often some people haven't had that experience. You know, I've been very, very fortunate myself because I'm a graduate. I've worked in different environments, so I understand the challenges of the workplace. But my first work experience was tremendously terrible. You know, I was green, I was naive, and I was living aside the disability factor. But you know, you learn through that. So I do think that people need to be better prepared, better supported, and the Access to Work scheme should be extended to enable people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or learning disabilities, mental capacity, to enable them to access employment.
Thanks, Asif. Yeah, I'm sensing there's a lot of issues around the traditional recruitment process.
Yeah.
And I'll continue a set, Vicky. I think my polemic on this is that it's not so much about whether or not you're getting the right person for the job. It's about who's good at the interview. Yeah, it is a process, and some people are great at interviews. Some people love interviews. Yeah, there's a friend of mine who absolutely loves interviews, and the rest of us, we know it's a process that we have to get through. And the reason why we kind of get into that trap quite often is it's not so much about the person that gets the job. It's about having a defence and justification for those, should you be challenged, for people that don't get the job.
But also, Darryl, sorry to interrupt, there's also a notion, I've certainly had it, and maybe I'm the only one, but you also recruit on the basis of organizational fit. Who will fit this organization? Who will, do well in this organization? And I heard a saying somewhere, and I think that's right. When you fear competition or fear change, then you stagnate. And I think people should be able to embrace new people, different viewpoints, not necessarily that fits their own. So it's quite courageous to do that.
Okay, thanks, Asif. Vicky, yeah.
I think that's a really important point that Asif just made, actually, that diversity of thought and diversity of folk makes organisations so much stronger. And I think before we do any recruitment process, we have to acknowledge that we've all got prejudices. We've all got unconscious bias. Some people have conscious bias, and it's inbuilt into us as human beings. And it's our job to notice it, to recognise it, and do something about it as well. I know that about a year ago, I was talking to my director of people. We were struggling to get someone into a job, and he said something, and I said, well, as long as I've got 2 arms and 2 legs. And he said, why? And I went, bloody hell, yeah, why? And that was just a glib comment by me, but it's in us. And so since then, I've been so aware of that and really recognised that within myself, but we've all got them as well. So I think when we're planning recruitment processes, you're right, we screen for people who are good at interviews and exams. I'm one of those weird people that likes them, but we also got inherent bias to try and find people like us. And actually, so at Project 6, we've done a load of work, and our stuff's not perfect, but it's a lot better. It's really wide ranging, it's simple, it's values based. We've stopped looking for so many academic qualifications. We've really reduced our people specs down to, are they absolutely critical? Actually looked at ways people could demonstrate those values in another way, caring responsibilities, for example, so not necessarily in a workplace as well, but we do. And we've started to think about, how do we recruit different folk? Because actually we want our organisation to represent the communities that we're in. And that's the other really important point, isn't it? It's about lived experience as well. And then when you've got folk in, having a really good learning and development offer. In our line of work, we like to employ folk who've been through the drug and alcohol system quite often. That means sometimes you get nurses and social workers, sometimes you get people that haven't been to school since they were 13. And it's our job to create a workplace where both of those people from both of those ends of the spectrum and everyone else can come in and flourish, but be supported to be the best that they can be as well. And it's when you say it like that, it sounds massive and really complicated, but actually, if you take it, you can make it much more, you can simplify it and make it much more manageable by just thinking about really simplifying your processes and being values based.
Thank you. Thanks all for those.
But we have a hand up from May.
We have got a hand up from May. Yeah. Okay, May.
Sorry,
Right.
Going back to what Vicky was saying. So I've met, I've worked in the NHS for 13 years, and I've worked for other organisations as well, privately as an occupational therapist. And I have met people who have come from diverse backgrounds. But the one thing that I've found with people who've come from more disadvantaged backgrounds, is the whole their ability to advocate for themselves. If they didn't have that, and the thing is that if you've got a disability, I feel like my disability at times of my life has affected my ability to advocate for myself. And has affected my self-esteem and my confidence, and there's probably a few other words that I can't think of right now, but do you see what I mean? It's just so it goes beyond, it's also about
the culture within the organisation.
also bringing people, like maximizing their potential, seeing the potential in that person before they can demonstrate it themselves sometimes. Anyway, I'll stop there.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. Of course, there are loads of barriers that disabled people face in the recruitment and retention process. Okay. Physical, communication, technical, yeah, cultural, social, economic, and the flexibility. So, to the panel, what should be the approach to reasonable adjustments? And have you got any examples to back up that you could share? Shall I start with who wants to go first on this one from the panel? Let's have a look.
I'll go.
Asif.
Yeah. All those factors you mentioned are a lot obvious barriers. But in my experience, as a disabled person, the key barrier is getting the right information at the right time. Information is power. It enables you to look for jobs, apply for jobs, prepare yourself for jobs, doing research, etc. And I think the recruitment of people, bringing them in, needs to be a process of disseminating information as widely as possible, and society in general about job promotion needs to be made much more aware. Nowadays, technology, whilst it's an absolute tool to getting information, can also be seriously challenging for those who can't access technology if they don't have the right assistive technology. So, when you are looking for jobs and you haven't got any support, trying to access IT to look for jobs, there's a double barrier for you. As a vision impaired person, certainly that's my experience. And even people with learning disabilities or intellectual limitations can't access loads and loads of text. So we all need to understand how best to provide information. I'll give you my first example. When I started working in the voluntary sector in '98, I bought the workplace, and my colleague was saying, "What are you talking about? Just get to the point. Just make a letter briefer, more succinct, and use less words and words we can understand." And over time, I've learned that to drop a very formalistic style. I think that's in tandem with society in general, really. There's a greater embracing of the more informal style of communication, writing. And it doesn't have to be poorer. It just needs to be simpler and more accessible. So in a nutshell, information is key. And I think people need to be empowered to access that information properly to make informed choices about everything in life.
Thank you. I can see some nods of heads there. Becca, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything Asif's just said. And in fact, something he said previously is kind of coming back to me now in thinking about your question, which is the whole process of how you enable people to apply for work. So when we talk about reasonable adjustments, I mean, in my work life, that's usually been all around how you make reasonable adjustments in the workplace to enable someone to be able to fulfill their role. But actually, I've just made a little list. It starts with the advert. It's what Asif was saying about how you provide that information. Sorry, that's my doorbell going. Bringing my whole self to this meeting. That's what Asif was saying. Making that information available in multiple formats and actually promoting it in different arenas as well. If you put an advert in an online tool, that's immediately going to mean that a lot of people aren't going to see it. I was also thinking about, the fact that this may seem unrelated, but I think it is. National Lotteries recently begun to change the way that they expect people to apply for their funds, and you can put a proposal in now and you can write something, or you can do a little video, and they don't mind. And that just blows my mind, actually, because I've been around long enough to remember, what Asif was talking about, that formality of the workplace. And I think that's going. So that kind of thing, make it possible for people to applying for a role in a way which is going to work best for them, enable them to shine and show their best side. Obviously, how you do your interviews, how you manage your workplace is essential as well. But there's another bit as well, which is workplaces and teams aren't just about work. Social stuff goes on too, and that's important to think about. It's really the glue that joins everyone together, isn't it? It's that bit about how well do you know people and how well can you get to know people, not just within the work role, but as a whole person.
You raise a really interesting point there, Beck, about, you know, when that person joins the organisation. Say, for example, it's a person who is on the autism spectrum, okay, and they don't understand the unwritten rules of that organisation. Yeah, you know, at 11 o'clock, you know, somebody takes it in turn to make the tea, for example. Yeah, you know, who's going to actually, you know, sort of clock that and make sure that is understood, and so that person isn't feeling anxious as a consequence and people judging them because they're not a team player, so to speak. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Vicky?
Great, thanks, Becca. Thanks, Asif. I think I'd not really thought about it in terms of information before, so that's really made me think about it in a different way. Thank you. Thanks for that. So there's the easy. So for me, reasonable adjustments is a case-by-case basis, isn't it? Because we had a conversation about the actual definition, didn't we, Daryl, the other day? There's a more straightforward black and white stuff, which is software, access to employment, changes in the physical environment, lighting, tech stuff you can do, ramps, there's all that type of stuff. But that's straightforward. It's the cultural stuff that we need to make adjustments within our culture, don't we? And that's the much more challenging stuff. It's a much more interesting stuff, but it's the stuff that's much more subjective, I think, isn't it? So I'm thinking about a few things that we've done. So we employ lots of folk who come with dependency issues. It's not a disability as of yet, but actually, you know, it's a long-term condition. It's inherently linked with mental health as well. We have lots of conversations with people who are in recovery about what do you need in terms of your support. Talk to me about what you might need in support. And then so we have conversations in terms of mental health and recovery about the challenges that people come with, the issues that they've had in the past, what's happened to them in previous employers where things have broken down, what would they want to be done different. So if you feel there's a trigger or a craving or a challenge around managing your anxiety or depression, how will you know? How will you tell me? How will I be able to support you? What do you want me to do? What do you want me not to do? How can I make it better? How can I make it worse? And how will we work together to overcome this type of thing? So if we notice you feeling like this, what do we do? So we have those conversations in our one-to-ones and our supervisions and kind of contract. And that's about creating that kind of the psychological contract you have with work, but on a bit of a different level. So there's something about those conversations with individuals. And then there's something about creating, and it comes back to the culture where you can be yourself, bring your whole self to work. So we have a number of, as all organisations do, stuff that are neurodiverse and a couple of folk on our board who are quite significant neurodiversities. So what we've done with the board is we've identified that, we've had some training with the board, and we start our board meetings with statements about how it's okay to be yourself. If you need to get up, turn your camera off, if you've got a clicker or a spinner, or if you need to take some time out, all of that stuff's all right. So we don't just kind of try and change the culture and do it almost covertly. We're really overt about it, and we say if you need to do XYZ, it's all right, it's encouraged, you know, it's accepted and it's encouraged because we want you to be able to be yourself. So you kind of have to start off really overtly setting that culture, and I think that's really, really important, and I think that's something our organisation needs to do across the rest. We've started with the board, which is great because you should always start, you know, with the folk with the most power, and then we need to work across the rest of the organisation to do that.
Thanks, Vicky. Your examples there reminded me of the relaxed performances that go on theatres and in cinemas and what have you. And but a lot more of that, perhaps in the workplace environment, might be great. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think colleagues have covered it really, really well. It is about culture, but it's also about the flexibility and understanding the individual and how that individual works. And I think it's where we look in terms of, we don't need traditional working days. We've proved that we can be far more effective for working with the people at their best. So in terms of, from our point of view, staff at the moment can work from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It works at times where they might do a few hours as a break, they come back, they do things in such a way. It's how we utilise the technology to support them. So them environmental-based approaches, sometimes working here in the office, sometimes taking time out, sometimes working from home. So it's a lot more, I think, of that flexible-based approach. But it's also being able to have those conversations. And I think it's right. What you said, Vic, is really powerful. And I think it's understanding that individual and what they bring to the organisation and to the role, but also knowing there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, and how together we can work through that. We all talk about duvet days. It's a thing that 2 years coming out of COVID, we were quality together. Nobody'd ever said a duvet day before that. Where'd that come from? But we've started to bring things in where staff can identify this is a duvet day, right? Okay, how can we plan and how can we work around that? So I think it's how we always agree that we're going to continue to learn. And Vicky, totally agree. It's got to be that top-down based approach. Our boards, and for us with people with lived experience in particular, set that approach, and it's how it cascades down. But it's how we embrace it and how we start to live it. And sometimes we're going to get it right. Sometimes we're going to get it not so right. And that's what we can do from there.
Thanks for those. My sense is that, it's a lot more difficult for shall we say, corporate organisations to be more flexible in their approach than the examples that you guys set. Okay, but I might be wrong on that. But it just seems to be it's harder for that tanker to change in the water for a larger organisation than it is for relatively small organisations who are much more open to innovative ways of employment practices. And
Can I just...
sorry, go on, Becca.
No, I was going to say, can I come in there? I think you're observing something that we often talk about around the voluntary sector and the organisations in it, which is they're quite nimble. They can be quite responsive to circumstance because that's just the nature often of how we have to work, and responding to funding that's got to be spent in 3 days' time and all that kind of thing. But what was I going to say? I was going to say I've got a question as well. Back to you, Daryl, and maybe the other panel members and the other people in the meeting, which is a long time ago, when I was at university, one of our lecturers was a chap called Mike Oliver, who was a disability rights activist. Quite strident guy. He scared the life out of me because I was too young to understand what he was talking about. He was all about saying, if you have, for example, buses, people with certain disabilities might struggle to get on that bus. So the bus should have mechanisms that lower it, that enable someone to get on it. That's just a right, okay? That's a right that everyone in society has a right to be able to get on a bus. It's just that the majority in society, the things that we use, the buses, the cars, the workplaces are designed around the majority. But that doesn't mean that the people who are in a minority with perhaps a physical disability have any less a right to be able to come to the workplace, to get on that bus, to drive that car. My question, and I don't want to take us off track too much, but is how do you get that point across to an entire kind of workforce and team that actually adjustments are made for everybody? You have a set of stairs in a building. It's an adjustment. It enables someone to get from downstairs to upstairs if they're able-bodied. We have everything is adjusted in order for us to be able to use it. And how do you get that across to a team so that the person who may be the only person in that team who's got a physical disability doesn't feel, I may be putting words in people's mouths, that's sort of singled out, or the focus is too much on them, or kind of uncomfortable about how they may feel that they're drawing on resources which actually are resources used for everybody. It's just tailored in a different way for that person. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's we talk about reasonable adjustments, and actually the legal position is it's an anticipatory duty. So it's something that we should have already thought about as a matter of course, as opposed to, oh, right, okay. And, you know, lots of scurrying around, trying to actually find the adjustment to support that person, and realizing that you've got limits of time. Let's say, for example, somebody applies for a job, and it's a very typical example, and that's a deaf person, and they need a BSL interpreter. Have we anticipated that? Because we ought to have. It's a reasonable thing to do, and legally we ought to have done that, and I've set the plans in place should the needs arise for a BSL interpreter. So it is about thinking about it earlier on, and getting the practices in place, so that you're not going to think of everything, but you've got a better chance of demonstrating how inclusive you are as an organisation, and therefore getting a better reaction from a person who to out themselves, if you like, as a disabled person. Yeah,
I think a couple of comments, Darryl. I think firstly, from an empirical point of view, the world, the society, the workplace is developed from a non-disabled person point of view. So, you know, everything.
Frozen again. I see.
Sorry,
He's back.
You're back.
You know, stairs are there because an able-bodied person, non-disabled, can walk up and down. So that's the majority viewpoint. It's not modelled from a perspective of inclusion, and women would argue that it's a very man-made world, so that, you know, progression for them hitherto has been difficult in the workplace, because judgments are made about women's abilities even before they've had a chance to demonstrate their abilities, etc. So the actual world is excluded. It's excluding people by design and by culture. Yeah. And I think that needs addressing by a much more empirical framework that ensures things happen much more inclusively. Unfortunately, as you know, Darryl, it's always a resources-led argument that things can't be done because it's going to cost, etc.
Disabled people equals cost. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. Sorry, Vicky. Just on Mike Oliver. Mike Oliver was one of the protagonists, one of the authors of the social model, of the social approach, and some people who attended the previous session earlier this week, Mike was mentioned in that presentation around the social model. Sorry, Vicky. Yeah.
I'd like to come back to Becca's point about normalising adjustments, because I think you're right, we do it all the time. I make adjustments for my staff so they can go and pray on a Friday, make loads of adjustments for single parents, for people who aren't single parents, people have caring responsibilities, people. I have to make adjustments for myself because I'm reliant on Northern Rail a lot, and that's a challenge at the moment. But we make adjustments to people, or people with mental health issues, people with recovery issues, people going through IVF, people with long-term conditions. We make them all the time. And actually, if we normalise that and say, you know, we value you, and we talk, and I think it comes back to not just doing it and slipping it under the radar, but doing it and being out about it and proud about it, because then it becomes you can't change culture by doing stuff under the radar all the time. Is one of the stuff I've really learned from the last, especially in COVID, when you're not visible in offices, you know, when you have to make an effort to do that informal communication, so that staff know that if I mean, you're right, we need to anticipate certain stuff of it, Darryl. I'm thinking more of the cultural stuff, that it becomes a cultural norm, actually, because you're right, I've got 64 staff and all of us will have some kind of adjustment to our working life at Project 6.
Yeah, we're not special. We've all got our things that we would and ways of working, and we need an organisation to support us to enable us to bring that whole self to work. Yeah, thank you. The third question, okay, is it's around ambition. I've seen, and this actually, it's a little bit unfair because you know, it'd be nice to have a public sector organisation on the panel, but public sector organisations have what's called the equality objectives, and they have to produce an equality action plan. And I've seen quite a few examples of equality action plans, and there's been specific targets in there in terms of, for example, black people into management, and you know, ambitious for a mathematical representation, if you like, for their workforce to be, you know, representative of the demographic in terms of BME and whatever the acronym is that we need to use, and for sometimes for LGBTQ plus. And I have hardly ever seen any ambition for disabled people to be the next chief executive of that organisation. I've seen quite a few examples of getting more people into an organisation, but it's almost as if there is this inequality within the equality areas of how we would support disabled people to be in there, bring their whole selves, and for them to have that career within our organisations. And I'm happy to be proven wrong. So over to you guys. Who would like to go first?
I think I would say just what I've been saying for the last few years, that disability in society has fallen off the agenda generally. And I think, you know, between 10 years of 2000, 2010, 12, you know, massive progress was made in socialising disability with the Equalities Act and so forth. But since then, particularly with CCG commissioning coming on board, there's a lot more preponderance towards medicalisation, you know, medicalising health issues, you know, to meet national priorities on CHD and diabetes and obesity. And I think in amongst all that, disability as a disability business has fallen off the agenda. And that, I think, has crept into the whole kind of societal response, if you like, to recruitment, to inclusion. Invisible unless you're the lucky few who can be quite empowered and progressive and been blessed with education and so forth and abilities. So, you know, I do think there needs to be a redressing of that, and I think this week is a fantastic step in the right direction, if you like, to redress that balance.
Okay, thanks for that. Before I bring the others in, remembering there was a recommended equality monitoring form that was given to an organisation that I know well, and this was given by a national organisation who are very much in the equality field, and the equality monitoring question around disability was as follows. And let's see what your reaction is. What is the effect or impact of your disability or health condition on your ability to give your best at work?
Mm-hmm.
And in other words, blaming the person and say, yeah, and wow, you know, and if that's the level that we're potentially going to ask, and how exclusive are we right at the beginning of the process, and why would anybody dare to actually out themselves as a disabled person when they're applying for a job? Anyway, okay, that's the side. So, right, okay. Mark, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to echo what Asif said. I think that we had a great deal of movement up until 2012, and then everything's gone really, really quiet. And the thing is, at times people see the disability, they see the barriers first. They don't see the value of a disabled person, what they can bring to the organisation and how they can rise through the ranks in terms of leadership opportunities. We're part of a national movement, which is called Reclaiming Our Future Alliance and Disabled People's Organisation Forum for England. And we put a paper together highlighting the barriers for disabled people in terms of workforce and leadership development. And it's a shame, really, because we have so many skilled individuals out there that are desperate to work and can't get those opportunities in. And I think, again, as everything we've said previously, it is about the culture and how we alter the culture and how we make our city of Bradford the shining example in terms of being totally, inclusive and providing the equity through that process. So yeah, I agree with Steve. We've got some major work to do, and I think through the VCS and through the statutory sectors, we could make some shining examples for the rest of the country to follow.
Thank you. Okay, Vicky, would you like to add to that?
I totally agree. Things are often system issues. It's the same in substance use. We blame the individual. We talk about personal responsibility, and actually we never look at the impact of systems on people. And that's the same for lots of issues around protected characteristics, substance use, mental health as well. We need to stop doing that, because actually we talk about substance use disorders, and actually they're not disorders. They're a perfectly rational response to somebody dealing with a significant amount of trauma that they're dealing with, and we have to change some of the systems and the culture that we exist in. That's really, really important. Project 6, we've done pretty well. 75% of my senior leadership team have a disability. Actually, and they're all really different, diverse folk, wonderful, and I don't know how we did it, if I'm honest. I've been sat here thinking about how did we get to that point? And I think by trying to be a really inclusive organisation where people can bring themselves to work, where someone can go, I'm having a really wobbly day, can I do this? Or someone can say, my health is really poor, I can feel XYZ rumbling up, can I work from home for a week, or can I have a few days off? Or someone saying, can I have some time off for this? Or us negotiating what might happen. So I just think it's about having that culture where you can be really open and honest. But I really think really strongly it's about changing the systems that we work with. And the question the comment you read out, Darryl, was appalling, absolutely appalling, because everybody is valuable. You're going to say to me, well, how are you discriminated against? Is it my fault I'm a woman so I can't do X, Y, Z? We wouldn't say that, would we?
No, we wouldn't say that. We wouldn't say it about anybody. We'd say it about disability. We wouldn't say what is the effect or impact of your race and you being able to bring yourself to work. Do you know what I mean? It's such a ist question to ask.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, Becca.
No, I was just going to make it exactly the same point. It would be like saying, what is the impact of you being a woman on how does that affect your ability to do your job? It's like it makes an assumption even, actually, doesn't it, that question, that someone who has a disability, any disability, is by definition going to have trouble doing all the things that their job requires of them. Well, no, of course not. Oh, goodness gracious! I need to know.
I've been a little bit mischievous there putting that one in, but yeah,
you're being naughty, aren't you?
But it just illustrates, how wrong we can get it, I think. Yeah.
I just very quick. I know we're short on time, but something that Vicky said I wanted to echo. So it was that thing about actually Vicky saying, I don't know how we've managed it, but we've got a really large proportion of our board who have disabilities. It's a point I was going to make. It's about, yes, you've got to do all the things we've talked about talking to people with lived experience, involving them in your processes and your planning, and making sure that the environment you have is physically suitable for everybody and all the rest of it. But it's also about just sort of almost like having a blank sheet, but it's an appropriate blank sheet that's open, and it says, right, just come to us. If you want to work here, come to us. And that you've got out of the way any of those barriers that might cause someone to do that. So yes, there's something about kind of what we used to call positive discrimination, you know, and having targets about having certain representation on boards and in your staff team. That's important. It's an important way of monitoring how you're doing. But really, it's about what Vicky was saying, I think, cracking that thing of how you make a culture which just doesn't, it becomes just a non-issue in the first place. Like and everybody understands whether they have a disability or they don't, or whether they identify with other protected characteristic groups, that, you know, we make adjustments for everybody. We're all unique, and we all come with a certain set of expectations and requirements, no matter about those other things. And it's about understanding that people with disability are no different. It's no different from an adjustment that I would expect to be made for me.
Thank you. Okay, I know we're short on time, Vicky, but I just wondered if we want to throw it out to some questions now, or what do you want? Do you think?
Yeah, we've got one whole minute, so let's do it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Has anybody got a burning question? There's a couple of comments in chat.
I wonder if people would value having more conversations like this, if there's somewhere that where we can continue this conversation, because I've learnt loads. You know, I've learnt lots from all of you actually during this conversation.
I think yeah, I suppose in terms of taking it away, it's about continuing the dialogue. It's about knowing that you know, we're not going to get it right all the time. But you are open, and that get the defensive mechanism out of the way, and try to be as open and inclusive as you can be, and talk to people to open your eyes to do things a little bit differently. Yeah.
Vicky, I'm quite happy for anyone to contact me. You know, if contacts are being shared with the audience, the attendees, anybody wants any further information, help, whatever, I'm sure the colleagues will be equally available.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Vicky, yes, please, if we can continue this conversation as we move forward.
Yeah, and May's made a good point as well about putting some stuff up visually as well. Yeah, to be more inclusive. Yes, thank you, May. Good point. We should have thought of that. Yeah, and we'll definitely think of that for next time as well. So yeah, what we could do is we could ask Shaq. Shaq will have a list of folk that have been involved in this, and we could send out some of our questions, some thoughts as well. There's one thing that I read that really changed my thinking about this, and it was a Brené Brown podcast, and I'm trying to think of it if I've got it was Brené Brown, and it was about the body is not an apology, with Sonia Renee Taylor, and it's about body shame, self-love and social justice, and it blew my mind. So I will ask Shaq if he could send that round. It's like 50 minutes, but it's really, really worth it, and it really made me rethink a lot of this stuff.
Brilliant. Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Definitely.
Yes, so thank you, Darryl. You've been an amazing Fiona Bruce. Yes.
She needs a shave.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks, folks, for coming along. Thanks, Asif. Thanks, Darryl. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Becca. Thanks for folk that have turned up. Thanks for your comments, and thanks, May, for that great challenge as well. And we'll work out how we can carry on this conversation.
Thank you.
Kate wants to be involved. Catherine's up for it as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.